I'm here to help you build the perfect double game week 25 team. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today I'm going to help you build the ideal team ahead of double game week 25, which is going to be a really big week in FPL. Now, I'm going to go through the must-haves, a couple of them are on the screen right now, and then have a look at some nice-to-haves, followed by some good differentials that you can pad out your team with, followed by a number of single game week players that we really shouldn't be forgetting about. But to start off with, let's take a look at some of the most obvious must-haves ahead of double game week 25. And the two Liverpool assets I would say that probably need prioritising as it stands are Darwin Núñez and Diogo Jota. Now, I put down that they're must-haves. That doesn't mean you absolutely have to break apart your team to get to them. I just think that out of the Liverpool assets we've got available, they are probably the two most important and the two that are likely to carry both the attacking upside and hopefully decent expected minutes going into the double game week. Now, I've got a section later on the latest for Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold because both of them are carrying potential injuries at the moment. And if they were fully fit and ready to start, then they would also be must-haves, and probably in place of one or two of these. However, as it stands, we don't know about them, so we'll talk about that later on. Darwin Núñez and Jota, I would say, are the two most important players to have in the Liverpool double. Now, Brentford away, Luton at home is going to be a cracking double for Liverpool. They carry a load of attacking upside as well, and picking attacking players in that front three is going to be really important to guarantee you some points in the double game week. Now, it is worth noting that Liverpool do have the Carabao Cup final after the Luton game, so there is a risk that no matter which Liverpool player you bring in or captain for this game week, they are going to have probably fairly shaky expected minutes across the two matches. I don't think that many, if any, Liverpool players bar Alisson are expected to play 90 minutes in both matches. Maybe Van Dijk in there as well, but outside of that, the attacking assets probably won't be getting 180 minutes across the double. However, with that being said, Núñez's underlying data of 0.97 XGI per 90 is absolutely astounding. And yes, he's frustrating, but he does now get those returns, and he is getting those returns pretty consistently up until now as well. So I'd have no qualms about bringing him in or buying him just for this double game week if you haven't so far. Diogo Jota doesn't have the benefits of the same sort of levels of attacking data as Núñez, but he has been in phenomenal form recently. The data is still good at over 0.5 XGI per 90. And we've seen this season, he's in red hot form. He's a lethal finisher. And again, it would take a very brave FPL manager to go without at least one of these two options going into the double game week. So now let's talk about the Man City assets, and they've got a cracking double of Chelsea at home and Brentford at home. Now, both of those clubs will definitely come and put up a fight at the Etihad, but Man City at home, they've won 10 on the bounce now in all competitions. They look like they're steamrolling their way through opposition right now. I'd be surprised if they didn't get 5 or 6 goals across this double game week. With that in mind, I think Erling Haaland, now that he's back fit and firing and he's got his scoring boots on, is going to be as close to a perfect triple captain option as we're going to get any time this season. There will be other options, but I think for me, the triple captain armband is very likely going to be on Haaland this week. And I'd say he's one of the very few players going into double game week 25 that if I didn't have him at the moment, I'd be prepared to take hits to make sure that I did and I carried him into this game week. Over 1 XGI per 90, the guy is an absolute beast. I'd be very worried if I didn't have him personally, and I'd also be worried if I didn't stick the armband on him. Moving on from that, Phil Foden is also in absolutely fantastic form. Now, the XGI per 90 at 0.47 isn't as spectacular as some of his teammates, but he's in red hot form at the moment. He's occupying pretty central spaces, and when Haaland's in the 11, he also has been building up that partnership with him, playing off of him, almost as a shadow striker at times as well. And as we saw against Everton, he's got goals in him too. So I think at a very reasonable price point, Phil Foden is going to be pretty close to a must-have in game week 25 as well, if you can get there. Moving on from that, I think Kevin De Bruyne is maybe not necessarily a must-have, mainly because of his price point. At nearly 11 million now, I probably wouldn't be ripping apart my team personally to get him in if it meant taking hits and manoeuvring players elsewhere. But if you've got him already, you're going to be absolutely delighted with having him ahead of this double game week. The underlying data is fantastic. He's got 5 returns in 4 Premier League games in the last 4. So he's in great form as well. And obviously, when you're supplying players like Phil Foden, like Bernardo Silva, like Erling Haaland, like Julian Alvarez, Kevin De Bruyne is going to get attacking returns. He's going to get the assists, and he was unlucky not to score over the weekend as well. So if you've got him, you're loving life. If you've got an easy route to him, I'd say he's a pretty obvious transfer to make. But even though he's on the graphic here as a must-have, I'd probably say he's the one out of the 5 I've discussed that if you can't get to him, I don't think it's worth breaking apart your team to do so, because I do expect him to get at least 1 early sub in the double, and maybe he leans more on the assists than he does the goals. But that being said, fantastic option. If you can get to him, if you've got him already, you would absolutely be loving life right now. Now, I've picked out 6 players that I'd say are not necessarily must-haves, but definitely nice players to bring in this game week, or if you've already got them, you're laughing. Now, Ivan Toney is definitely the one that is closest to being a must-have out of all of these. I think he's been phenomenal since returning from his ban. Really good underlying data at 0.58 XGI per 90. It's not an easy double though. That's probably what brings him down one little bit under the other 5 players I've already mentioned. Now, Liverpool at home, Man City away. It's not going to be easy for Brentford, but Ivan Toney does have a great track record, not only against Premier League opposition, but against top 10 opposition as well. Half of his goals last season actually came against the top 8 in the Premier League. So he is a player that raises his game for the big matches, and I'd expect him to do no less against Liverpool and Man City. So if any Brentford player is going to be scoring points, it's very likely going to be him. He's also at a really reasonable price point, just over 8 million as well. So again, if you can get to him, maybe without a hit, then he's probably going to be a really nice option to carry into double game week 25. It's also worth noting that he doesn't blank in game week 26, won't blank in game week 29, both of which will be fairly big blanks. So structurally, moving forwards through the game weeks, he's actually a really clever option to have in your 11. If you've got him already, again, a bit like De Bruyne, you're laughing. And if you've got an easy route to him, he's a very nice player to have. Moving on, Alfie Doughty is the only one that I've upgraded to this area, to the nice to haves in double game week 25. I think we were all brought down to earth a little bit with that Sheffield United loss, that 3-1 defeat. I think maybe brought us all down a little bit in the expectations of what we're going to really be expecting from Luton assets in this double game week. They are a good attacking team at times. They will get goals, and I don't think that they're a bad option to hold this game week. But I think we just need to taper our expectations slightly, because like Brentford, they've got a really tough double. Man United at home, Liverpool away. You do expect them to concede in both of those matches. So bringing in a goalkeeper, defender, you're not expecting clean sheets. But with Alfie Doughty in mind, the attacking data is there for him. 0.22 XGI per 90, I think is good enough for his price point to be buying him this game week if you've got nothing else to do. Doughty not only doubles in game week 25, but also in double game week 28 as well. He will blank in 26, so you do need to have a plan for that and make sure you don't have too many blanking players in 26 if you buy Doughty now. But considering he's got 2 doubles in 25 and 28, and then might be playing in 29 still, I definitely think he's a nice player to have. Now, there are 2 Liverpool players on this graphic, the first of which is Luis Diaz. Now, his data isn't fantastic. It's a shade under 0.5 XGI per 90. He's not quite as explosive as Jota or Darwin, but he is pretty much as nailed as them in the starting front 3 for Liverpool at the moment. And he could be a nice little differential enabler to pick up ahead of double game week 25. His ownership's not going to be that massive. His data's still decent. And as we've discussed already, Brentford away, Luton at home is a good double game week to have for Liverpool. Speaking of Liverpool assets, Van Dijk is also a really nice player to own in game week 25. His XGI per 90 for a centre-back is not bad at all. A lot of that is goal threat as well. And he seems to have a pretty good track record in the double game weeks, which we shouldn't really have any bearing on. But it is worth noting that of all Liverpool players, he's probably one of the only ones, or the only outfielders, I'd probably expect, rather than hope, expect him to get 180 minutes or close to. Now, that is obviously going to be beneficial to have a player that's playing as many minutes as possible across the double game week. I don't think you can say that about many other Liverpool players right now. So I think for his price, for the fact that Brentford and Luton, there's a chance of a clean sheet in there. There's also a chance that he might sneak a goal from a corner, something like that. Big header in a double game week. You can see it written already. So Van Dijk, I don't mind as a nice to have either. Now, moving on to the two Man City assets that I'd say are also nice to haves, but not essential. Alvarez, I think if you've got him at this point and you've kept him this far, then you probably want to hold him for the double game week. I don't think he's going to be as good an option as the three I've already mentioned, but I certainly wouldn't be selling him unless it meant that I could get to one of those other players without a hit. Chelsea and Brentford both at home. He has got good underlying data, in fact, very good underlying data at 0.64 XGI per 90. He's also on set pieces at times as well, was taking a few corners in game week 24. So again, I fully expect him to be a good option. I wouldn't be ripping apart my team to sell him. Certainly not. And I probably wouldn't go as far as saying I need to buy him ahead of game week 25. But he's a very nice player to have nonetheless. Now, the Man City defence is going to be very topical this game week. And Ake's in here kind of as an example rather than necessarily the player I'd be bringing in. That being said, though, out of the Man City defenders, I think it would be nice to have at least one of them. Ake would be my current favourite at the moment. He's very reasonably priced at 5 million. He's started the last 8 games now, I think, and played a full 90 in all of them, if my memory serves me correctly. And his XGI per 90 is very, very good. And a bit like Van Dijk, a lot of that is goal threat. I think he's got 5 attacking returns this season as well already in the Premier League. So the guy isn't just clean sheet points. He also could get you lucky with some sort of goal contribution in the double game week. It is worth noting that no Man City defender, maybe bar Ederson, is completely nailed. So Walker could get rotated, Ake could get rotated, Gvardiol could get rotated. You're kind of just buying a lottery ticket. That being said, I think Ake is probably the most likely one given his form and given how Pep tends to go on little runs with players that he trusts. I think Ake is the most likely one to get good minutes, but that is by no means a guarantee. I think if I was going to buy one, it would be him though. So I thought it'd be fun to include a little bit of a differential section ahead of double game week 25. What's FPL without a little bit of a differential to sprinkle into your starting 11 for a big double game week? And I've picked out 6 of my favourites, but do let me know in the comments below if there are any others that you've thought of that I haven't mentioned. However, starting from the top left, Neil Mapai is going to be probably one that most people would laugh at and ignore because out of the 2 Brentford strikers, Tony is probably the one you'd want to go for. He's on the set pieces, he's on penalties, and he's been phenomenal. However, there is an argument to suggest that Mapai has been a little bit unlucky not to be talked about more often recently. He's actually done a very good job as that secondary striker, and his underlying data, believe it or not, is actually better than Ivan Toney so far at a cheaper price. So if you're lagging behind, if you want to be a bit differential about things, Neil Mapai might not be the worst shout across the double. Now, it is a difficult double game week. I think there are probably better strikers out there to be buying. But again, if you're chasing rank, if you want to be a little bit different, Mapai, there are worse options out there, I think, than Mapai, put it that way. Now, moving on to the other Brentford player that I'd probably be looking at, I don't expect many clean sheets from Reguilon in the double. Obviously, Liverpool and Man City will almost certainly score against them. But he is on set pieces, he was taking corners, and he does have decent underlying attacking data. At just 4.4 million, I think he could be a very interesting differential if you're struggling to figure out which defenders you're looking at buying and you're not completely convinced by the likes of Alfie Doughty, for example. So he could be a little sneaky differential. Now, another defender I really like the look of, even though his price point is more difficult to get to, is Andy Robertson. Now, he got his first start back from his injury over the weekend, played really well for what it's worth, and his underlying attacking data is also not too shabby either. With Trent still being a bit of a doubt, and a lot of us still on players like Kieran Trippier, maybe we can use those funds for someone like Andy Robertson if you're feeling a little bit brave about it. Now, again, I think he'll be ultra differential. I think there are probably cheaper options I'd prefer. But again, if you're thinking differently, if you want to try to chase rank quickly, his ownership is incredibly low at the moment. He's got good attacking upside. He's got a great history in FPL, so we know what he can do. I think there are definitely worse options out there. Now, finishing off with the 3 Luton assets, I don't want to spend too long on this, but if you can hold on to them through game week 26 when they blank easily enough without worrying about your starting 11, then I think any one of these 3 could be a decent player to have in double game week 25 and carry them through to double game week 28 as well. Now, starting off with Ross Barkley, his underlying data isn't fantastic. 0.28 for a midfielder is definitely not brilliant, but he is cheap enough that you could take a punt on him and hope that the upside comes through in the double game week. Like I said, if you can bench him in game week 26, play him in double game week 28, you might just about come out on top for someone who is at a very reasonable price point. Speaking of reasonable price points, Adebayo has been fantastic recently. I think it's 9 Premier League goals, 1 assist now, so 10 attacking returns at under 5 million in FPL for a striker is phenomenal. The underlying data also isn't bad either. 0.42 XGI per 90 is absolutely fine. And again, if you're looking for a budget enabler in that striking spot, in that attacking force, Adebayo might not be a bad shout either. Now, finally, probably the one I like the most out of the Luton differentials is Kaminsky. The reason for that is that he's much easier to hold on your bench in blank game week 26 because you most likely have another playing keeper that will play in that game week. That means that you could gain the double game week this week, gain the double game week in 28, and also not worry about 26. Now, that is really helpful for someone like Kaminsky. Now, again, we're not expecting clean sheet points in this double game week, but if he gets a few saves, and who knows what can happen, like he might get a penalty save, he might get some upside there, then we might get lucky with Kaminsky. Now, it is worth noting that the XGC, that's the expected goals conceded per 90 for Luton and for Kaminsky, is over just 2 goals a game. And they're about to go up against 2 pretty tough oppositions in Man United and Liverpool. So you're not expecting clean sheets. You're probably expecting a few save points, but also conceding a few goals. Maybe that brings it down a little bit as well. So he's a nice differential, but he's far from essential when thinking about transfers to bring in ahead of double game week 25. Now, I did mention earlier on that we discussed Salah and Trent ahead of the double game week. And normally, ahead of a Liverpool double game week, these would be 2 of the first names on our team sheet. However, both are injury doubts ahead of game week 25. Now, looking at Salah first, I think we're all very well aware that he's been out for a little while, that we've seen him in private gym sessions over the past week, and Klopp has also mentioned that he hopes that he could be parts of training this week ahead of double game week 25. Now, whether or not that means he gets any minutes in 25 is very much up for debate. Now, I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers there, but one thing I would suggest is that I think it's pretty unlikely he gets the Brentford game, certainly not from the start. And if he's only going to be a part of parts of training this week, I think it is unlikely he gets anything at all. Now, that Luton game, he might get a few minutes ahead of the cup final if he's ready, because I think they'll be fighting tooth and nail to try and make sure that he's ready for that cup final. That's going to be a big game for Liverpool. Obviously, Klopp's final season in charge. They're going to want as many trophies as possible, and they're going to want their talismanic forward ready for that game, if at all possible. Now, with that in mind, I think that unless we hear some sort of definitive news from Klopp that he's ready to start the Brentford game, you could probably go without Salah at this point. I think the other Liverpool forward options are good enough, even if they get reduced minutes in the second game and Salah gets a few minutes. Their upside is still there. They're cheap enough and they're attacking enough that I think they're still worth it. And you probably don't need to be ripping apart your side to bring in Salah, considering his expected minutes for double game week 25, I think no matter what, are going to be pretty low. Now, obviously, keep your ear to the ground. If Klopp says something that contradicts this, then please listen to Klopp, not me, because he knows Salah's fitness much better than an FPL YouTuber. However, as it stands, I would say quite confidently that Salah's minutes are going to be low enough that he's not going to be a massive option for game week 25. Now on to Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he's a really interesting one. He's been sort of nursed back into the first team since injury. He hyperextended his knee, and he also came off at halftime with the same knee issue in game week 24. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of rumours about how bad that injury is over the stretch between now and the deadline for game week 25. And I don't think, unless Klopp is feeling very, very generous, we're going to get any sort of definitive news on Alexander-Arnold. I think based on the information we've got to this point, if you don't have him, there is no way I'd be bringing him in ahead of this double. I think he's going to get reduced minutes. They're going to try and keep him back a little bit, make sure that he's fit for that cup final, a bit like Mo Salah. Now, if they can start him in at least one of the games, I think they probably will. Make sure he's got minutes in the tank. But I think no matter what, they are going to be taking him off early. They are going to kind of wrap him up in cotton wool a little bit in this double. So if you've not got him already, I wouldn't worry about it. If you do have him, like me, I think we've got a big decision on our hands. Whether or not we just sort of leave him to one side, we just let him have the double game week in our teams, not rip apart our teams, get rid of a double game weeker, and hope that in whatever minutes he does get, he gets some sort of returns. Hopefully he gets past 60 minutes in at least one of the two games and maybe gets 45 in the other one. Now, I'm actually pretty tempted to make sure that I've got a plan to sell Trent this game week if I have to. Now, the amount of money he's worth means that there's a lot I could do with my team. I've got 2 free transfers, and Connor Bradley will hopefully, likely be back. And I think if we get some sort of positive leak going into Saturday morning, Liverpool being the early game on, that Bradley is starting, Trent isn't, then I think having a plan to bring in either Bradley for Trent or Van Dijk for Trent, or maybe even Robbo for Trent, could be on the cards. Now, until we get to that point, we're not going to know. We might get a little heads up from Klopp about the injury, but for the time being, I think don't make moves. Definitely don't buy him, but I think if you've got him, leave him in your team for the time being. Have a plan for if he is confirmed to be injured, but for the time being, just leave it. Don't make any rash moves, and fingers crossed that we get positive news ahead of the deadline. Now, I wanted to wrap up today with a quick section on some of the single game weekers, and I think we very quickly get a little bit obsessed with the double game weekers and forget sometimes that single game week players also score points. They do it every other week of the season. Why should this week be any different? And yes, double game week players have a much higher ceiling. They are going to be incredibly important, but having 11 double game weekers isn't always the play here. Having some of the really good single game weekers that we know are reliable, that we know are likely to return, they're not worth ripping your teams up to sell ahead of game week 25. And these are the 5 players I think managers are going to be tempted to get rid of, and there will be arguments to get rid of maybe 1 or 2 of them in your personal team. So this isn't saying no matter what you do, you cannot sell these players. There are always going to be options and different ways of playing the game. However, I would urge caution and think before selling any of these. Saka being the first one. I think he's the most important player that out of all of these, I would definitely want to hold on to unless I absolutely had to sell him to bring in one of the more essential players for double game week 25. Burnley away from home, and his underlying attacking data of 0.8 XGI per 90, 5 goals in his last 5 now as well after a brace in game week 24. There is no way I'm getting rid of him unless it's for one of the most essential double game week players. And it would have to be not for a hit. It would have to be because I think that they are absolutely ideal for game week 25. I will be fighting very hard to make sure that he's in my team come game week 25's deadline. Moving on from that, Richarlison, I would maybe understand it a fraction more than Saka if you got rid of him. He's been phenomenal recently, obviously, but Wolves at home is not as good a fixture as Burnley is. His underlying attacking data, whilst still fantastic, by the way, is just a shade under Saka's. And importantly, he's got a blank coming in game week 26. So if you can look forward a couple of game weeks, realise that it could be a problem, the amount of Spurs, Chelsea, Liverpool players you've got ahead of game week 26, then I would understand if you wanted to chase the upside of someone like Phil Foden, who's got a double, then no blank in game week 26, and is not that far off the same price point as Richarlison. Obviously, you need a little bit more money to get to Foden, but I would understand that move more than selling Saka. That being said, I think he's definitely a player I'd try to hold on to if I could. Moving across, in defence, Trippier is probably going to be one of the players that managers are tempted to sell ahead of game week 25 because there are Liverpool and Man City defenders that you might be tempted by. With that being said though, I'd urge a lot of caution, and again, I wouldn't be selling him unless I absolutely had to. 0.33 XGI per 90. He's one of the top point scorers. Well, I think he is the top point scorer defensively in the game this season, and he's in red hot form at the moment from the underlying attacking data point of view at the very least. Bournemouth at home, I see points on the board for Trippier there, so if you're selling him, please be ultra confident that the player you're bringing in is likely to outscore him. And for what it's worth, I don't think there are many, even double game weekers, now that Trent is a big question mark, that are guaranteed to outscore Trippier at home to Bournemouth. So again, I wouldn't be ripping apart my team to get rid of him this game week. The other defender I probably wouldn't be ripping apart my team to get rid of is either Saliba or Gabriel. Now, for the sake of this chart, this graphic, I put Gabriel on, but this could easily be levelled at Saliba as well. Both of them have been very good recently. Arsenal are statistically the best defence in the league. Burnley aren't exactly pulling up trees from an attacking point of view, and I expect Arsenal to try and keep it tight at the back once more. And it is worth noting that Burnley have the worst expected goals conceded from set pieces all season. Meanwhile, Arsenal, and importantly Gabriel and Saliba, are two of the best attacking assets from set pieces, especially from corners, so far this season. Arsenal have scored the most goals from corners, well, set pieces in general, out of any of the 20 Premier League clubs. So there is no way I'd be selling either Gabriel or Saliba or benching them unless I had an absolutely stacked cast of double game weekers that I really truly believed were going to play 90 minutes in both matches and had very good chances of not just clean sheets but attacking returns as well. The final player we need to talk about here is Ollie Watkins. Now, obviously frustrating to blank in game week 24. For what it's worth, I think he was extremely unlucky not to get an attacking return. I think there was a couple of assist opportunities, a couple of really good saves from Onana as well. So on another day, he could have gotten a pretty decent haul against Man United. That being said though, because he did blank, I think there are going to be sales of Ollie Watkins. I do understand the logic because Tony, Darwin, even Alvarez are all going to be pretty tempting double game week options. But I would urge caution because every time I've sold Watkins so far this season, he's immediately gone and hauled, and his underlying attacking data is still fantastic, as you can see on screen. Villa have still got good fixtures to come. Fulham away in game week 25 is still a pretty good fixture. So I think you need to make sure that it's not ripping apart your team to sell Watkins, that it is a move that you can easily handle, and you can handle the fact that Watkins doesn't blank in game week 26, he doesn't blank in game week 29, and you're not ripping apart your team to make sure you just jam in as many double game weekers as possible without thinking about future moves that you need to make to have an ideal team for those other game weeks. That being said, I do understand the logic. I think he is one of the two players here that I would understand selling more than the others. I think Richarlison and Watkins make more sense than the others, considering the options on the table, and in Richarlison's case, the fact that he's got the blank next game week. But I think all five of these are very easy holds unless you've got a really good plan set up ahead of game week 25 to bring in another doubler that you're very confident in. I'd be absolutely content with starting any of these in game week 25, and I think any five of these could easily haul, and sellers could easily regret getting rid of them in this double. So there you have it. Hopefully this video has helped you out in preparing for double game week 25. I tried to run through all of the key facts and figures and make sure that you are set up with all of the information possible to make a good decision for your team going into a very important game week. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers. I'd love to hit that number before the end of the season. So thank you very much in advance for all of your support. And I'll see you later on this game week as we prepare my team for game week 25.